TSB, proud sponsors of About the House.
In this year's series of About the House, I'll be following some exciting and ambitious house builds and renovations, as well as some smaller projects where we show what can be done with less space and tighter budgets. In Donegal, I'll be revisiting Cahill and Sarah Stevens to see how their ambitious Passive House standard renovation of a 200-year-old cottage turned out. And down the road from them, I'll be following a family bringing an ancient settlement of vernacular buildings back to life, one house at a time. Back in Dublin, Dominic and his wife Anne are completely renovating a protected Regency house from the inside out and hoping to transform it into an energy-efficient 21st century home. And elsewhere in Dublin, smaller projects such as those I follow in Rathgar and Dundrum show how you can completely change your home without moving or even extending. In Wicklow, we go back to visit Graham and Mago and see whether they managed to achieve the healthy house they were hoping for. And in Louth, Michael and Marie Pentony are turning their cottage into a more efficient home that will be wheelchair accessible for their son, Liam. In this week's episode of the new series of About the House, I'll investigate the buildings and ways of living that will take us into this new century. I'll look back on what has gone before and see what we've brought with us that can help us on this journey and what must be left behind. And at the Sustainable Home Exhibition at the RDS, I'll find out how our homes are now being built. In the 18 years that I've been making this series, I've seen a revolution in how we live, how we design, and how we build our homes. Now, as we move further into the 21st century, I find myself asking, what is the house that will help us meet the new challenges that we now face? So, what is the house of today? As we've moved through the years, the style of building that we've constructed and the way we've lived inside them has evolved. From each successive age, we've learned something. Some knowledge has been discarded, some brought with us into the next era of living, and some resurrected from centuries past. But the advancement of our living conditions has only looked forward. With each new development, we've left the old behind. When central heating systems became mainstream, open fires became nothing more than nostalgic symbols from the days when a family gathered around the hearth together each evening. When double glazing and then triple glazing was invented, this was quickly adopted. As insulation has become mainstream, it's now the thing everyone strives for, whether they're renovating or building. And the disappearance of the open fire heating system has ultimately resulted in the emergence of the now ubiquitous open plan living. We no longer had to close off our larger homes into smaller areas in order to keep them warm. And we moved on from the formal way of living, which necessitated a myriad of rooms for every different function of life. So we began to knock through our walls in our quest for more open space, more light and views. Until we arrived at the modern ideal of an entirely open plan living area with only the bedrooms and bathrooms closed off. And sometimes not even that. But running parallel to these changes inside our homes have been the changes to our buildings themselves. The materials we've used in our new homes have historically been shaped by the events happening in the world around us. Glass-clad commercial buildings, as well as steel and concrete. These characterised the buildings of the cheap oil age of the latter half of the last century. The exotic woods from far-flung places. These were used in the 18th and 19th centuries as all our homegrown timber had been depleted. Every material we use in our house, every craft skill, every part of the structure of our house has a story. Our roofs are more than just the way in which we have kept ourselves dry. They tell the tale of our history. The fine and durable natural slate that forms the basis of many of the roofs of older Dublin buildings was brought here as ballast for the empty boats, returning after taking all the Irish oak away to build the British Empire. So many of the buildings in Ireland that are near a port have slate roofs. But as transporting goods was expensive, houses that were located inland use more local materials, in particular thatch. Thatch roofs evolved differently in various regions of the country. Each had their own technique, developed over the centuries by trial and error, to weather the storms. Every room had a fireplace in both poor and rich houses. For millennia, it was the only way people had of heating their homes. Now, many fireplaces lie dormant, with families gathering around the television instead of the fire. Open fires waste a lot of money. For every 10 euros of fuel that is put on the fire, 8 of these go up the chimney. With our new methods of heating, it's no longer necessary to use this inefficient way of keeping a room warm. This way of heating, that endured for the majority of our entire existence, is finally becoming obsolete. The shutters on our windows were, in the days before insulation and efficient seal windows, a way of insulating glass and an added security measure. But now, with triple glazed windows and improved locks, shutters have almost disappeared from modern house designs. But these windows on our houses are also windows into the past. Glass used to be very expensive, so there were only tiny window panes. The tall vertical windows on Georgian houses had 12 panes of glass instead of 2 large ones, 6 small ones in the top and the bottom sashes. It wasn't until Victorian times that they learned how to make larger panes, so people installed increasingly bigger windows to show off their wealth and status. As a result of this, a tax was put on windows. As the more wealth you had, then generally the more windows you had. Structures like the former Parliament building had their windows entirely bricked up to avoid the tax, something which had remained to this day. In the end, the ever-increasing size of glass panes culminated in the modern extreme of whole buildings made of glass. These buildings are no longer an expression of contemporary architecture. They're a symbol of a bygone age when energy was a cheap commodity. Soon the cost of heating and cooling an all-glass structure will become prohibitive. Whether we realise it or not, cheap and plentiful energy drove the whole aesthetic of contemporary design. So what are the forces driving us now as we look to the future? In the 20th century, little thought went into how much it cost to run a house. Now this is becoming increasingly relevant as energy prices continue to rise. We'll want locally sourced materials and methods that will enable us to spend less on running our house. Health is another factor. In this informed age, we're no longer ignorant about the toxic chemicals and emissions that could be lurking in our houses. Wood is a renewable, sustainable resource that stores carbon. As we move increasingly towards system-built houses, timber frame is becoming the obvious choice. Not only do zero carbon footprint houses have the lowest impact on the environment, but they're also cash positive, as they produce energy that can be sold back to the energy companies. Houses like this have led the way to our current design and building ethos. It's now time to take what we've learned so far and use it to take us forward. I've come to the Sustainable Building Show in the RDS, where a house is being built that's a representation of what we can expect of our typical homes from now on. Whilst pioneers such as Patrick Daly have built zero-energy houses, this house will be the first that can be reproduced on a mass scale and for a corresponding price. In part 2, we follow the construction of this new project.
ESB, proud sponsors of About the House. ESB, proud sponsors of About the House.
I'm at the RDS to learn about a house that is being built that is a prototype of the house of the future. The architect behind this, Mike Haslam, talked to me about this in more detail, whilst the final touches were being put in place and the exhibition was being set up. Mike, you're the architect for this house here. Tell us about your concept.
Okay, what we're trying to do with this house is take our sort of assembled knowledge at Soul Earth over the last sort of 15 years of building sustainably and put it all together into what we're pitching as the house for the 21st century.
The team had only 4 days to get the house ready for the exhibition. Work has been going on feverishly to get it up in time. Now that the build is in its final stages, I've come to see how it's shaping up. Peter Smith is fitting an example panel of wall insulation and making the house airtight. I wanted to make sure he was doing this to a high standard. You're doing the insulation?
Yes.
All ecological insulation here, I see.
It's all breathable, hygroscopic hemp insulation. It's a natural insulation.
And it breathes?
And it's breathable.
Right.
So it has the ability to hold moisture and release moisture.
This is very important, as a breathable wall means that damp will not build up within the structure, and therefore there'll be far less risk of decay, heat loss and mould. Aside from the insulation, Peter's also making the interior of the house airtight to ensure that vapour doesn't penetrate the wall fabric.
So we'll put up some Intello at that point, and we'll make it airtight and tape all the overlaps. And having done all that and checked it and tested it, we'll put counterbattens at this point to form a service zone, which means that we can put all our cabling, wires, services and so on into this zone without damaging the airtightness membrane which we've put in. And then on the inside of that, to once more improve it again, we can add some more insulation, and we'll fit this wood fibre insulation Holzflex, which will make us even more snug, and it will bring our U value up to a point where we're going to be losing hardly any heat at all, and it'll become a very efficient house.
I also want to find out how sustainable the materials being used in the construction of the building are. So what about the materials, Mike?
So the predominant material that we're using is timber, and the timber frame itself is supplied from Ireland, so from Irish woods, Irish sawmills. And then we're using an OSB board, an orientated strand board, Smart Ply, which is manufactured in Ireland itself using waste wood chip products.
Why are you using Irish materials?
Locally sourced means that we can, one, we're supporting local industries and supporting local employment, but also we're reducing our transport costs. So the timber that we're using, the Smart Ply that we're using, is not coming that far.
Smart Ply is not the only Irish timber product being used in the house. Kitchen designer Patrick McKenna is using an MDF material. What's the main kind of material now in this?
Well, it is made in Clonmel, so it's locally produced.
We went down to Clonmel to find out more about it. This plant is in fact the only place in Ireland producing MDF from homegrown timber. Not only that, but it's a state-of-the-art facility which is competing with producers from the UK and the rest of Europe.
We sell, 20% of our production sold in this country, with the other 80% exported into the UK and mainland Europe.
And the MDF or Medite they make is a specialised niche product.
We produce 7 different product types, and again, our business is all about producing products fit for purpose and niche markets or value-added type products.
They have a range of different boards which can be used for a multitude of purposes. There's the moisture-resistant Medite being used by Patrick in the kitchen. But there are also other boards such as flame retardant and exteriors with the low environmental impact.
Medite MDF then ticks all the right boxes from an environmental perspective because it's made from locally grown trees. The material itself then is 100% recyclable and can be reused again. So it's a very much an environmentally friendly product, both in its raw materials and in its production.
Aside from these benefits and those that it brings to the Irish economy, I found that it's also a well-engineered product from a design and workability point of view.
And is it easy to work, and is it, stable as a material?
It's very stable, and what I like about it is I can get the clean lines. Some of the main details, we have a worktop that slightly overhangs the door so that you don't have the drip line.
And you can wipe down very easily.
You can wipe down very easily.
The kitchen also features an induction hob that uses half the electricity of the average electric ring, as well as a winter herb garden that's accessible from the window of the kitchen. But aside from the sustainable interiors and building materials, what's being done to ensure that the energy used in the house is carbon neutral?
The crucial thing is, you can see on the house behind us there, it does have a photovoltaic array. We've got 16 modules on this house. That's actually producing more electricity than you will actually require. You'll be being paid for the electricity you overproduce during the summer months. Beyond the idea of a productive surface just for energy, it's also about collecting rainwater, and this particular house as well is very obviously about channeling water down to a rainwater gathering unit, and then we're reusing that within the house for flushing toilets, for clothes washing, for gardening, etc. So again, this idea of a productive surface of not just providing shelter, as the roof obviously does, but also then about providing energy, collecting water, and symbolising that from a design point of view, making that a predominant feature of the house.
Mike is part of a rising wave of architects who are designing with the environment and the future in mind.
I think there's a growing band of professionals who are designing with sustainability in mind, particularly through IESCA, which is the body association of environmentally aware builders, product suppliers, design professionals as well, coming together under this umbrella of exchanging ideas, of exchanging knowledge, feeding off one another in terms of sustainable design concepts.
And now that the house is in the final stages, the finishing touches are being readied. Furniture designer Sasha Sykes is another ecologically aware designer who's working on the house, and she's making some pieces that will go into it. She also uses natural products in her design, but her reasons are aesthetic as well as ecological.
I started using the acrylics originally. I made a straw cube for my dad's birthday about 10 years ago, and I loved the way it had this transparency and revealed what was inside it, which was the straw. It just developed from there. I got really into using acrylics and resins just to show off nature and allow people to use nature in their homes. I do like working with the organic materials because I think that they are always going to improve a space. Aesthetically, they're just beautiful. Nature, you can't beat nature.
She told me some more about the pieces she was making for the RDS show.
For the Home Plus project in the RDS, I'm lending a couple of pieces. I have one piece that was a massive open shelving unit that was made using timber from the Lisnavagh Timber Project, where it's all traceable timbers, all Irish homegrown hardwoods. It's a very sort of zen-like piece. It's 4 levels, and it has acrylic uprights, L-shaped uprights to to separate the 4 levels, and they're alternating facing in and out so that the piece can be used in many different ways. The lamps I'll be bringing up to the show, most of them are the floral pieces. The flower lamps tend to be very popular. I think it's a lovely way of just bringing a burst of colour in.
Sash's furniture will be the ideal accompaniment to this sustainable and low environmental impact house. These forward-thinking designers are meeting the needs that we are now facing. The finished house marries simple contemporary design with future-proof technologies that will make it endure the challenges that lie ahead of us. As we go further into the 21st century, energy costs, resource efficiency and climate change will become issues that we can no longer ignore. Within the next 5 years, houses and extensions designed like this will become the norm. From the Georgian terraces that characterise many of our cities, to the vernacular cottages that are dotted around the countryside. From the glass structures that we favoured until so recently, to the open spaces that characterise our homes. These different methods of building and trends of living have all contributed to the evolution of our homes. They've brought us to the point where we find ourselves now, where we all want a home that's beautifully designed, but cheap to run. These are the qualities we're looking for as we move into the future. In next week's episode, I revisit Graham and Mago to finally see their finished house and find out whether they've managed to keep their enemy number 1 out of the house or not.
ESB, proud sponsors of About the House.